In a world full of turmoil, despair, and darkness, you need to carry the light. Season 3 of the Get Attitude podcast is where we will ignite your mind, your heart, and your attitude. And welcome to the Get Attitude podcast, Season 3, Carry the Light. And ladies and gentlemen, we have somebody that carries the light. Many have considered him to be a torchbearer. This gentleman that you're going to meet today, that you're going to learn from today, that I hope you tap into today, has an attitude of overcoming, has an attitude of taking on things that are bigger than himself. And as Attitude Booster number 10 talks about, you got to be a part of something bigger than you. And this gentleman is the ambassador of global relations at Butler University. He was also our former Secretary of Commerce. And the thing that's so cool about this is he ran for governor as a Democrat, and our Republican governor actually handpicked him and said, you know what, I want you to be our Secretary of Commerce for the state of Indiana. And what you'll soon find out, and I'm pretty sure that this is true, is that collaboration, that foresight and that light created probably the most successful and profitable relationship Indiana's ever seen in that department. He is also, prior to running for governor, an extremely successful entrepreneur and business owner. He was the owner of CSO Architects here locally. And the one thing I know about him is he gave away a lot of his services. He designed and created architectural plans and master plans for many, many nonprofits. And so when I think about carrying the light, I think about the one and only Jim Schellinger. Jim, welcome to the Get Attitude podcast.
Thanks, Glenn. It's always good to see you.
It's great. And welcome, and I hope you enjoy this. I don't know. I've interviewed you on TV. Have you ever done a podcast before?
I did one time. I had the privilege of doing one with Gary Dick a while back.
Oh, okay. I think I maybe saw that. Well, let's get right into it. I always love our guests to talk about their definition of attitude, what attitude means to them, and who was your first attitude teacher?
Well, it's interesting when you think about attitude. The first word that comes to mind for me is choice, right? Because you get to choose what your attitude is. And as you ask that question, I'm thinking in my mind, everybody has one. And you have one 24/7, whether you choose to or not, because it might not be a good attitude, it might be a bad attitude, and we like to associate it as being a good attitude. But I think that I live my life in a very positive way. I am blessed beyond blessed. I told my wife not long ago, if I could go back and do everything again, I wouldn't change one single thing, with the possible exception of when I was at Notre Dame in the 5-year architecture school program. I worked full time at a tool and die shop as a steel grinder. And I said, I wish I could have gone to college without distraction and not had that. So everything was a deadline. But I think attitude is every day I wake up with a positive attitude. I thank God for all the blessings he's given me. And I thank for my family. And it couldn't, I don't know how anybody that is blessed what I am couldn't have a positive attitude about these.
I love it. And then when you think about who instilled that in you, or who your attitude coach was, your first attitude coach, where do you think that came from? And what was the lesson you learned?
I just was talking about this the other day. My mother was a very influential person in my life. She was the master. She was the mother of 8 children, a loyal wife of Boyd, and we raised 8 kids. She raised 8 kids in a tiny little house, Glenn. As a realtor, sizes of homes. This was a 995 square foot house.
Oh my
there
God.
were 10 people sleeping in the area. It was like 455 square feet. And we wanted for nothing. If I could go back tomorrow and spend a day at that house and ride my bike, my Stingray with my ball mitt around it to Keller Park, I'd give anything to do that. But my mom, she was very influential. She was didn't go to college. She skipped 7th grade because she was pretty sharp, pretty smart, and she had a big influence on me. She had more common sense, Glenn, in her pinky than most people have in their whole body. And she was the one that instilled, probably in me more than anybody, that if you're not living a life in service to others, you're not really living at all. And as little as we had in terms of material wealth back in those days, every gap was filled with love and companionship of our brothers and sisters and our friends, and it couldn't have been better.
That is so. And what's her name? We got to honor her, right? What's her name?
Patricia Schellinger.
All right, Patricia, this show is for you. God love you. And I have to go back to that tool and grinder shop. What was your attitude in that shop? What was the attitude of the people you worked with? What did the tool and grind shop, even though you wish you could have gone to school uninterrupted, what did that shop and that atmosphere and those people teach you about attitude?
Well, it's funny. When I stepped down as secretary, I had to put together a resume. I haven't done a resume since 1984. And at the tail end, Laura says, "You can't go longer than 2 pages." I said, "But I'm not 22 years old, graduating from college. I'm 61 years old. I got something, I've got more things to list here." And at the tail end of it, she took exception with the fact that I wrote down 3 positions I held that I said were really, in my education and career background, were the School of Hard Knocks. I started my career at 13 as a dishwasher at the Moose Lodge down the street. North was a bartender at, much like the Knights of Columbus on the north side.
Yeah.
Then I graduated up to Moral Seminary out at Notre Dame, where the priests are trained and where they live. I was a janitor there after school throughout my high school years, washing, mopping the floors and taking out trash. And then I graduated to the tool and die shop. What was amazing about that was, as a steel grinder, it's the lowest job on a totem pole. Nobody wants it. Minimum wage. But it was a big deal to me. It was a big deal to me at the time to have that income while I was going to school. And, no one wanted my job. So as a result, I was like everybody's favorite. Everybody that wanted to gossip or talk, they talked to me because I was like communication central. And I loved it. I mean, it was, when I look back on it, it was grueling work because steel grinding is sanding the edges of steel. That's much like wood. The difference is instead of wood splinters, you get steel splinters, and they're harder to find. But it was a time of my life that, when I look back on it, I was taught so many things. And you can imagine in a tool and die shop, and you got a lot of tradespeople, which is a great, honest career in the tool and die shop. And you got a lot of people there. And here's this kid, that's going to Notre Dame. So it was a big deal for them. And I took a lot of pride in that. And as such, I felt like I owed them an attitude, so to speak, as we're talking about here, that showed that they were just as important as I was. And they admired the fact that I was going to college and going to Notre Dame because it's a big deal locally, as you know, and going to be an architect. They're mystified by that. But those gentlemen back then taught me more than I could ever put into words.
Yeah, that's cool. What do you have a story, or was there a motto or a lesson or something that somebody used to say that always kind of comes back in your head when you think about those guys? Anything specific is what I'm getting at.
Well, the thing I just remember, 2 things actually that you remember. One is sometimes they send me to do something and they say, "This is government work. This is G work." I had no clue what that meant. And I figured, okay, we're doing some work for the United States government. And that was not the case because they were basically, that meant I was doing something for somebody personal in the plant, usually the 2 owners. I was doing something that was for them personally, so they called it G work, government work. And then that was always followed by, "It all pays the same."
Right. I love it. Well, how fun. I've never heard that. You always learn something. I felt like there was going to be a lesson or something that we could all take from that tool and dial shop. So thanks for doing that. Now, you're currently the ambassador of global relations at Butler University. And I think we talked a little offline. We're going to work backwards on all your accomplishments and how you've carried the light in different organizations. Pretty big title. When you think about torchbearers, that title gives it. But what I'm more interested in is this Indiana Global Economic Summit, first one ever. I'd love to hear the story about how that worked and what's the attitude lesson of starting something like that in year one, and overall, what are you doing in your current position as the global relations liaison at Butler that has to do with attitude? So just maybe there's a whole bunch of stuff for you to talk about.
Sure. Well, I'm so grateful to President Danko for giving me the opportunity to serve at Butler. And Butler University, as we all know locally, it's one of those things that it mirrors the state of Indiana, in my opinion. As I traveled around the world and represented Indiana from an economic development standpoint worldwide, outside of Indiana, the other 49, as well as countries all around the world, sometimes we are known as being very modest people. We don't boast about ourselves. We don't go around talking about ourselves. We put our nose down and we get it done. And I think in many respects, that's Butler University. It is a very unique university. It's a very special place. I look at it as the preeminent university in our capital city of our state of Indiana. And I think there's deep meaning in saying that. In terms of the first ever inaugural Indiana Global Economic Summit, my hat's off to Governor Holcomb and the Secretary Brad Chambers. They just did a phenomenal job with this. This was conceived on a treadmill in Germany in 2017. I would wait, believe it or not, Glenn, I'd get up in the morning, I'd do a little exercise at 4 or 5 in the morning, get ready for the day. And I was watching TV on the treadmill over there, and I saw President Trump and Vice President Pence, who gave me my first opportunity at economic development, was former Vice President Pence. I saw him at the Davos World Economic Summit, and I was watching him, and so I texted the governor. I learned to do that on a treadmill to be efficient. And I said, what do you think about a mini Davos in the Midwest? And he wrote back a couple hours later and said, that sounds good. What is it? I said, well, we've got 37 to 38, now I guess 40, 41 countries have invested in Indiana in a big way. You look at the Japanese automobiles, for instance. We have 3 plants, Toyota, Subaru, and Honda. There's not another state that can boast the level of involvement we have in the automobile industry beyond anybody when it comes to Japan. So I said we've got 37, now 41 countries invested in Indiana. We have got worldwide global companies that are headquartered throughout Indiana. We've got some of the best universities and colleges that are anywhere in the world, and why not? So it's one of those questions. Again, I think back to attitude. I never get the quote quite right, but I always loved Bobby Kennedy when Rose Kennedy said, some people look at the world as and say why, and Bobby said, I look at the world as it could be and say why not. And it was kind of that. It was a Kennedy moment for me, because I just wrote back to the governor and said, why not? We can do this. And there were a lot of naysayers. Frankly, they thought it was a little aggressive. It was maybe too much. Nobody would come. But again, the job the governor, Secretary Chambers did, we planned this to be on April 22nd of 2020. Well, we all know what happened then.
Right.
So while we started a foreign playbook for it, and I talked to people in 27 different countries about it, which were all present, I would tell you as well, but we had to cancel it. So Secretary Chambers and the team picked it up. I got to attend one of the days here in town, and again, 37 countries invested, 27 of them were here from all, and these were ambassadors and consul generals, business leaders, educational leaders, all coming to Indianapolis, and they rallied here, over 1,000 people, to just discuss things that we're all affected with in business. And it all, as you know, and apropos to this conversation, it all starts with attitude.
Sure.
And you have got to have a positive, can-do attitude. I don't know why you'd get out of bed in the morning if you didn't have that.
Sure. So when you think about, when did that occur? Was that just recent?
Yeah, just recently, just a couple weeks ago. It was actually over race weekend,
I'll be done.
Which was a great thing because, back in 2017, we decided, the governor and our team decided that we should really go all out in making it the Indianapolis 500 our national, international event. I mean, sometimes it's one of those things like when I was a kid growing up in South Bend and I'd see people at the gates in Notre Dame taking pictures, and I'd say, what are they doing? Why are they here? Because we took it for granted.
Right.
There it is. People travel to see this. Well, I think sometimes in Indianapolis, we take it for granted that we have IMS here. And if you drive by there any time of the day or night, there's people at that gate taking pictures. So I thought, what an attraction to have all these people come in for the race. So we were hosting well over 35 countries at every single race beginning in 2017. And I know it happened again this year with the Global Summit. And in the first 5 years, Glenn, the five winners of the Indianapolis 500 were from 5 different continents.
Yes.
which I think is just absolutely phenomenal. And what Roger Penske and Mark Miles and Doug Bowles are doing out there is just inspirational. Every time I see or think about it, and everywhere you go in the world, they know about the Indianapolis 500.
Yeah, well, Penske certainly knows how to carry the light. When you said, hey, I think we need to do this, and you said there were naysayers. So, Jim, there are people that have big visions. They have big goals. Some people think big. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Schellinger thinks big. You may be a person listening to this podcast that says, I am thinking big. I know I can do more with my life. I know that I have some ideas that are $1 million ideas that could be earth-changing. And Jim, I know you had those same ideas. What's your advice to them? Like, what are the questions you ask them? Do you have a plan? Do you have a strategy? You take on big stuff, and when people naysay, like, what's your attitude when somebody starts naysaying? And for anybody out there listening that has a big goal that they haven't hit, what's your advice to them? What's your process? How do you go about manufacturing what goes on in that head of yours that's huge?
I think Energizer Bunny. The thing is you cannot, when you have an idea and a vision for something, and I'm humble because I don't think it ever starts out that way as a vision, so to speak. And in fact, some people said, what do you think about this global summit and your vision? I'm taken back a little bit because on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis, I don't think of it in that way. But it really is, and you're right about that. And I talk about my humble background. I'm very proud of that, and I talk about it not to say poor me, but I credit that for everything I am. If I hadn't had those roots, if I hadn't, Glenn, as you know, back when we were kids, all we had is a male young person in sports, and we were taught so many values and so much about attitude when we play athletics, and now it's so great with Birch Bayh and Title IX that it's everybody now. It's not limited to a gender. It's everybody, and it's very inspirational. But I would tell people, when you think of something like the Indiana Global Summit and people start throwing things up, well, cost, or this puts a spotlight on Indiana, it's going to show that we're not as good as we should be educational wise, or we eat too much and smoke too much, or we've got this and that. And I look at somebody and say, well, we don't have an exclusive on that. And typically, these big issues that we deal with in society, they're not solved by a person. They're solved by a team of people, a whole group of people that goes out and unites toward a common cause. And I look at it as, this may be good, it may not be. I try to do my homework up front and then put some steps out there, and I just take off. And when I hit that proverbial wall from back in the days when we watched Animal House, when the band went into the alley, when you hit that brick wall, you have a good attitude about it and say, well, you know what, we're better for giving it a shot, and you go another direction. But I've had a blessing that most of the things I've thought of in those moments, the big ideas, have come to fruition, but mostly because of the people that I surround myself with and have had the good fortune of having around me. I always say, we hear from great leaders all the time, surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. Well, that's never been difficult for me. That is a long line of people, Glenn, you included. So it's never been hard to do that. But as you know, a team is the deal. It's the magic word that gets things done. And as I said, Secretary Chambers and the team, and he'd be the first to tell you, he led the charge, he carried the torch, but the team did just an outstanding job. Yeah, that's so great. Not an answer you get from many people that have done what you've done, but I think, ladies and gentlemen that who are listening, I think what Jim's really saying is, let's become more aware of who you're hanging around. Let's be more intentional about who you want to hang around. And it's not you that's going to get your big idea to the finish line. It's going to be you with a whole bunch of great people. And I think, man, that's just such great advice. I just love it. Let's talk a little bit about being the Secretary of Commerce. You broke records. Flat out, you guys crushed it when you were tapped on the shoulder by Governor Holcomb. Quick question, what was the most intriguing world leader or ambassador? I'd love to know, somebody that blew you away when it came to their attitude. What country, who was it, what dinner, what was said? And then I'd also like to know, and I'll follow up,
like who, maybe you don't want to say it, but like who were you disappointed in or what went really wrong? So like your best experience as Secretary of Commerce and maybe your worst experience as Secretary of Commerce.
Well, there are so many as you can imagine, and what an inspirational job. And I said to somebody the other day, Glenn, and you think about this in your old athletic days or in your coaching days at the very successful great Bishop Chatard. Think about in a football practice when you just were so thirsty you'd have given anything for a drink of water, and even sometimes when you got the drink of water you still were thirsty. Yeah. And I said, when you have a chance to step up and serve. And I'd never done this before. I've been in the private sector my whole life. But when you have a chance to step up and serve and can have a positive impact on people's livelihoods and everything they do every day, it's a thirst you can never quench. It becomes something that you just live for. And that's what I experienced. And the leaders I met all around the world, and some of the best and brightest and most inspirational were right here in our humble United States, all around the country. But one of the leaders that I was really impressed with was Prime Minister Modi in India. The governor, I met with him and his chief of staff just very privately, and I was absolutely stunned how much he knew about Indiana with no notes whatsoever. And he took us back to Pan Am days. He took us through the development of the Colts and the Pacers, and you name it. He had everything down and talked about how he campaigned, which I thought was inspirational and a credit to our leaders in America as well as Indiana. But he said, I campaigned on three things: increase the GDP in India and health. And the way I'm going to emphasize health is through athletics. So he said, I have the money. I need arenas. I need coaches. I need players. I need, trainers. And if you think that was right about the time we were over there that the Indiana Pacers played in Mumbai, which was very inspirational when they played the Sacramento, is it the Kings? I think it is Sacramento Kings. Very inspirational. The young kids that were there, it was amazing. Meeting Viktor Orban in Hungary, who can be very controversial at times in some of the stances he takes as a political leader. But, doesn't mean he's not fascinating. But I met Justin Trudeau in Canada might be one of the most charismatic people I've ever met in my life that walks in a room, talk about lighting it up. And again, it goes back to the attitude. He walks in with an attitude. Right. And you can see it on his face, and it's contagious. And I love that. And one of the things I also love is when I find somebody that's not got such a good attitude, whether they're having a bad day or whether they're just, that's the way they are. And I love to bring them out of that shell. I love to get with them and start talking and tease a little bit here and there and find what their button is and get them to smile. Because it takes, I learned this one time back in grade school from Sister Aloysia Marie, Holy Cross Grade School. It takes less muscles to smile than it does to frown.
I love it. And so when you go back to your days as the Commerce Secretary, pretty unusual that a Republican would tap a Democrat for such an important job. What was the attitude around that decision? Did you hear, oh my God, are you sure you're going to go over? I'm sure everybody liked you and it probably wasn't this big of a deal, but was there a sense that, man, what the hell's going on? This is the craziest thing in the world? Or just like, how did it happen? And did you expect it? And then was it thought of positively or negatively?
Well, I'd served on the board of the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, which we all know is the genius of President Mitch Daniels. I mean, forming that to replace Department of Commerce and make it a public-private partnership was just an amazing, brilliant move on his part. And, whether it's Pat Miller or Mickey Mauer or Nate Feltman or Dan Hassler or Mitch Robe or Victor Smith, I mean, everybody that's served has done just an amazing job in that service. And I think that when I was first asked to do it, the first thought that went through my head was, I've never served public service, and I probably should get back. Now, I might remind you, I think you knew this, I committed 18 months. Right. I didn't commit to 5.5 years. But I committed 18 months for the remainder of then Governor Pence's term. And then, of course, Governor Holcomb, you can't say no to that guy. I mean, he is one of the greatest leaders of all time, and I hope he has some aspirations beyond being governor of the state of Indiana, because he has some talent and heart to bring to the whole world. world that could benefit us all in many, many years to come. So it was that call to service, number one. And then secondly, I have a small influence, a sphere of influence. It's tiny, tiny, tiny compared to, say, someone like yourself or even Governor Pence. But I thought, if this sends a message, even to that small sphere of people, that it's not about politics. It's not about Democrats and Republicans. And I'm not very technologically capable. About being on this today is about as good as it gets for me.
Right.
And that was probably a benefit back then, because Laura, my wife, was telling me there was some not so nice stuff said on the blogs, traitor and Benedict Arnold, and I was called a lot of things, and that was okay. I was okay with that, because the long and short of it is, when somebody would ask me, I said, boy, we did set records, 119,220 or 626 jobs under Governor Holcomb in his first term. And I think about that, and Glenn, all those jobs that we went after, all those jobs we were successful at getting, whether it be retaining Elanco and putting them on the GM site, whether it be Emphasis and bringing over a company from India that's the largest technology company in the world with 240,000 employees, or Greenleaf Foods, or you name it, Dow, keeping them here, which is, just Corteva now. All these things that happen, I never once saw a job that was labeled as a Democrat or Republican job. They were jobs. And I think that, very similar to your experience as coach, you have your rivals, and you may play Chautauqua Cathedral, but at the end of the day, you have school colors, but you kneel down and you say a little prayer together for all your safety and health, because you all are after the same thing. And I think in the end of the day, that's really it. I think sometimes the politics part of it gets too exaggerated. There are absolutely amazing people that affiliate themselves with the Democratic Party, and amazing people affiliate themselves with the Republican Party. And I think about that a lot now, post being secretary, to think, wow, Democrat, Republican, what am I really? I'm a patriot. And I think it's not about party, it's about people.
Yeah, I love that. That's so good. With that said, before that job, you did something that most people don't do. I mean, when you think about the population of America and how many people say, I'll step forward to run for the governor or for the governor of Indiana, right? Man, talk about an attitude. So, I want to know what the attitude was when you agreed to do it, or if you were forced into doing it, because sometimes that happens. Whatever. I'd love to hear the story when you said, all right, God dang it, I'm doing it. And then, what's the attitude of, running for governor? Like what all does that entail? What lessons did you learn that people can relate to? Look, just because you ran for governor doesn't mean that there's not a lot of strategies and answers for other people's lives. So just your whole experience with that and some of the great lessons you've learned.
Well, thank you for asking that. My general response when somebody brings up that time, I say, yeah, that was back when I was off my medications, but I'm back on. I've got control of it all.
Okay.
But, I actually had some people come to me, some really noted people in the state in leadership positions. And little did I know I was a total novice. This is back in 2006, and I was a total novice to all of that. My head was down. My nose was drawing buildings and things, which I was very content with, by the way. But I had some people come to me to say they just didn't think anybody was willing to step up. And little did I know, what I know today is, I didn't know who Mitch Daniels was. I knew he was our governor. Okay, I knew he succeeded Joe Kernan, who was a dear friend of mine, and we had the same roots, going to Holy Cross Grade School, St. Joe High School, and Notre Dame. I knew that, but I didn't know all the ins and outs, and really what a great governor he really was. So, and his legacy has proven that. But I was asked to do this to basically carry the banner for the party, and I agreed to do it after a lot of thoughtful prayer and things, and talking to Laura and talking to the boys. I actually went up and met with my extended family, with my siblings. And again, it was all back to those two very simple things I pointed out of why I agreed to be secretary. Is it's a public service. And I've never done that before. One of the regrets of I say I'd go back, I wouldn't do anything different, and I wouldn't. But one of the things if I really wish I had done is I wish I had served in the military. I wish I had worn the uniform and served our country. My son is doing that right now, as you know, a descendant of yours, who you coached, Captain Zach Schellinger, who's out in California at Camp Pendleton. My father, his brothers, they all served. But we were in a time where, we didn't have recruiters coming to our high school, and the Vietnam War left a bad taste in everybody's mouth, and so nobody was just running to sign up. But, the people that put that on the line, and we lost a great one just recently, Byron Bueller, who used to be the head of the blood bank. He served in Vietnam. And the people that did that sacrificed something that is unbelievable. And in a humble way, I would say that Laura and I, we sacrificed a lot in running for office.
Yes.
We were, this is a big state, a huge state, and there's 92 counties, and I was at every one of them at least 3 or 4 times. I was in Lake County 20 times. But the experience, as you mentioned, never fails. You go there on your 28th time, and someone say, "Where have you been? You never come up here." Well, I missed you the first 27 times I came. But, it's really blocking and tackling and getting down on the ground. And I just figured that my background, and I think those that came to me that suggested I take on this challenge, I think my background was a little unique for it. I didn't grow up in a political environment. Honestly, I don't know if my mom and dad were Republicans or Democrats. It wasn't an issue in our household. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing with 8 kids, and they're probably Democrats. But the point is to me, it wasn't about that. But the sacrifice it took, which I applaud anybody that's doing it and serving. And I didn't even serve. I just ran to serve. But it was a lot. Zachary, who I now say is a captain in the Marine Corps, we missed his 8th grade year, right. Essentially. I was on the road every day, everywhere. And but you also meet incredible people, and you are inspired every day by the people you meet in this state. Just phenomenal. When we talk about Hoosier hospitality, it's not just a phrase. I mean, I serve on the Capital Improvement Board, and I used to remember I'd be outside, and somebody said, they'd write letters after they'd leave Indianapolis and said, "Our convention was the best it's ever been." They said, "I walked out of a hotel and I wanted to find St. Elmo's." And I asked somebody, and they said, "Well, just come on, I'll walk you over there." And walked them 8 blocks to St. Elmo's. That's just the way we are as people in Indiana, and that's a humbling thing, but it's who we are. And I got to see it up close and personal when I ran for governor.
And so when you think about those times and all the people you met, certainly there had to be somebody, and maybe it was somebody that was very poor. Maybe it was somebody that was handicapped. Maybe somebody was sick. Could have been a billionaire. When you think about carrying the light, is there a story about where you had that, you met somebody that you didn't expect to impact you as much as they did, and who was that, and what's that story?
Well, that is a long list. I remember a gentleman that came up to me one time and shook my hand and left a penny in it. And he said, "I give you a penny for your thoughts. How can my life be better?"
Wow.
And those are humbling moments. And, as secretary, and the governor experienced this too, you drive around the state of Indiana, and you go to a Starbucks or a McDonald's at 10 o'clock at night, and you see kids in there that are working because they need access to Wi-Fi. And statewide internet is just I know it's a priority to the governor. I know that people in both chambers and General Assembly support it. It ought to be an all-out cry to get that done across the state of Indiana, but to have that access to put everybody on a level playing field. But there were inspirational people everywhere you went. And you see people that serve on a real local level. This is the most important thing they're doing. And what are they doing? They're serving chicken at a Jefferson Jackson dinner or something. But they're involved, and that's what I tell young people. One time I was asked by a group of young people when Indie Hub started. And they said, "How did you get your network established?" I kind of laughed. I said, "Network?" He said, "What the heck is a network?" I said, "I guess I do have a network, but I don't remember. I guess when I moved to Indianapolis in 1984, I didn't know anybody, and I came down here and I got involved. I joined them at the Heart of Mary, and I started getting involved. And that led to a lot of different things. And, and I tell young people all the time, get involved. Get involved and do something, and do something good for somebody. I used to tell Johnny that every day. I'd say, go to work, or go to school, work hard, have fun, and do something good for somebody today. And I think that if you use that as a motto, or like the great Joe Bill, I'll never forget your words in his passing, where every day think about, how does this get you closer to God in heaven? Yeah. Every action you do. That's stuck in my head ever since then. And I think that that's just the deal. You just meet these wonderful people that are giving of their lives, and you meet somebody, you're outside of a gate at a automobile plant at 4 o'clock in the morning when the shift changes in the cold weather, and you see what, the working men and women of our state are doing every single day, in every single walk of life, and it's inspirational. And you can't help but, when you do that, to realize that if you can fulfill that, it's fulfilling a calling. It's not I don't know how people I don't know how somebody would get motivated to serve politically over wanting to be in the political realm or wanting to have that notoriety or that title. I would think you'd crash and burn instantly, because you have to have a deep, deep feeling in your very soul of why you're wanting to serve other people. Otherwise, it isn't going to happen.
Wow, that's so powerful. Spirituality is such a huge thing. And one thing you gave, I'd love to know your lesson in this. Jim coached my boys for the New York Yankees at Haverford Little League, very successful. You had a great run, lots of wins, lots of rings. What did coaching young kids and your kids in baseball, what did it give you? What attitude lesson did it teach you?
Well, I think the most impressive thing, and I had such a great, I never was going to do that. I said, I will never be a coach of my sons, because when my dad was a little league coach, I'd get into it because I disagree with the lineup or something. I'd say, no, put this person there. They're better than this person. And he'd say, Jimmy, it's not about wins and losses. I'd say, Dad, it's all about wins and losses. But that was just so when I had the opportunity, I said, okay, I'll coach. They didn't have a coach, as you know, and they asked if I'd step up and do it. And I said, okay, I'll do it. But I had Nick, my son, my oldest son, who turned 40 this year, as an assistant. My son, Johnny, helped out. Zach was on the team. And I just said, I can't go to Little League Baseball 4 nights a week. And then on a weekend, too, I don't have time. So we did it. And it was an amazing experience. But I think that it goes from A to Z. I think, someone like your son Anthony was an amazing baseball player. So was Zach. So seeing those kids fulfill their potential is really, really fun and interesting. Yeah. But there was another young man that had never, ever made contact with a baseball, ever. And most times he wouldn't swing the bat. And I'd say, you got to swing the bat. It's okay to strike out. You strike out every time you go up to the plate, but you got to swing the bat. You got to be a player,
Love it.
And the first time I worked with this young man, I worked with him. His father would come to the game. How many of us know what that's like, where dad's out there ridiculing, yelling, screaming, and I'd say to him, Grant, it ain't, your dad's not out there. Your dad's not ridiculing you, and he's not trying to tell you get a hit or do this or that. You know what your dad's saying out there? He's telling you he loves you. He's telling you what he wants you to do to be successful, because he wants to see you succeed. So every time you hear him, because it used to drive him crazy, I said, just keep in your mind, your dad's yelling out, he loves you. So working with this young man, to see the excitement when he hit a foul ball, it was just incredible.
Awesome.
And he went to get 3 hits that year. And just to be able to see somebody that had zero potential and many, many challenges to do something beyond even their greatest expectations, to me, that's beyond words. You can't put that into words, and you can't buy it on eBay.
Yeah, Swing the Bat, probably the title of your next book or your new book. What a great piece there, Coach. That was awesome. I just want to touch on entrepreneurialism. I want to touch on owning a business. I'm not sure if you started CSO or not. I think if I remember, you worked your way into becoming an owner there. But and because I want to respect your time, I'd love to just have a brief discussion on your thoughts on attitude of entrepreneurship. The people that own small businesses listening to this podcast today, What was it like for you? What did you say to yourself when it was time for you to take the helm of CSO Architects? And why did you make the decision to do so much for so many for so little? Because I know you did. I saw Master Plan CSO, right? And I'm going, did they pay for this? And I don't think many of them did. Give me your entrepreneurial thoughts.
Well, that was actually one of the perks of being in a leadership position, is being able to do some in-kind work for people, and we did a lot of it. But the common denominators are that they are in life. It's all team. This, and I never did anything by myself. And I talk about, people say, "Oh, Jim was the architect on the airport." Well, there was a bunch of us on that airport project. Yes, my stamp's on it, but that doesn't. I didn't do that by myself. It's always about a greater group of people. Now, interestingly enough, in 1984, when I graduated, it was a recession. This should be something I guess we put this under the title of perseverance.
Yes.
So in 1984, I sent my resume out to 10 firms in Indianapolis. Now, prior to graduating, Santa Barbara, Boston, I thought of the glamorous places. But then I realized that my extended family was big, with siblings and nieces and nephews, and I didn't want to leave Indiana. So I sent my resume to 10 companies in Indianapolis. I got 9 Dear John letters. One firm didn't respond to me, Glenn, but 9 firms did. And of those 9 firms, 7 said they would keep my resume on file, but they weren't hiring. And the other 2 of the 9 said, we'll interview, but we're not hiring. Now, Glenn, this was in August of 1984.
Wow.
On October 3rd of 1996, I became the president and CEO of the firm that did not respond to me.
Wow. Now that's a track.
So I did my internship at a small firm, Cole Associates, here in town, and through a friend, I got an opportunity at CSO, which was already well established. It was established in 1961. And so I just got on board and do what you do. I was a project manager, and I worked projects, and I worked hard. I've told people when I had the privilege of speaking at the international school a couple of years ago, and I said to these young people, I said, I've wanted to be here and do this so bad. I said, because you're all so smart. Some speak 2, 3, 4 languages. And I said, in about 20 minutes here, you're going to see that I'm not a very intelligent person. I said, I was waiting to see Benjamin Netanyahu over in Israel a couple of months prior to that. And I said, his chief of staff said, you're really going to like the prime minister. He's a really smart guy, and he's funny. He's got a 200 IQ. I had to ask if that was good. So, I wasn't quite sure what that meant. But so I say intelligence, I separate that from smart, because I think intelligence is a God-given thing in my little world, by my definition. And smart is something you work for. I always had to work 3-4 times harder than most people did to get that same grade. And I never regretted that, or it wasn't a problem. It just took a lot more. And I used that. I guess I did the same thing when I went to work at CSO. I came from being a steel grinder, for God's sakes.
Right.
When I thought I'd get to work early the first day at 7:30, and I'd beat everybody in there, and the place was full when I got there. And at 6:30, I couldn't wait for people to start going home so I could go home. And we were just all there because of the love of the work we did. And I'd always tell the young architects, this is really important, Glenn. It serves me well in my life. I'd always tell them, every time you get out of bed in the morning, be excited, get pumped up and excited who you are and what you do, because every day you get out of bed, you have the privilege and opportunity of altering the surface of God's earth every day. But that comes with tremendous responsibility. And you got to take pride in it, but responsibility in it. And every day you get up and you do that, you have an opportunity to improve people's lives. Teachers become more successful with their students, accountants with, whatever it is. So our job is always to provide a quality service and use our total design skills. But it was always about enhancing and improving the client's success. It's all about other people. And I think that outward focus has served CSL well. It served me well. And I think to this day, they're sustained on that philosophy.
I love that. Man, that was just another unbelievable nugget for our listeners to take with them, how to wake up in the morning. And, we cover this, guys, we've had 2 seasons of the Good Attitude podcast. A lot of this is happening. This is being said in a different way, and it's so good. And you talked about perseverance, and attitude booster number 8 is love adversity. And we all know that adversity is the mother of perseverance. There is no perseverance without adversity. You've had to have some adversity in your life. Tell me your secret to busting through adversity. How do you look at adversity? Was there a time in your life you want to share where you busted through some adversity and there was a lesson there?
Well, I think my whole life has been about that. For this little chubby fat kid down on Beale Street in Keller Park neighborhood to have come all the way I came. As secretary, I got to speak on a panel discussion at Notre Dame with the dean of the business school and the dean of another college. And I thought, I wish my mom was alive to see this. Little Jimmy from across the river has grown up. I had opportunities that my parents presented us with, and our teachers and our coaches and friends. And I just always took advantage of. I just did the right thing. I wish I had some rocket science advice to give him. It was just like, people say, work smart. It's like Genius of the Ant by Jim Collins and Jerry Torres in the book Built to Last. It's Genius of the Ant. And I guess for me, you'll have to help me here, Glenn. I don't know if it's a bumblebee or a goose, but there's something, animal that flies, and they say statistically, mathematically, it cannot fly. But it does. And they said, because nobody told it can't.
Right.
And I guess that was, as I look back on, as I've gotten older now, I say that I'm on the downward slope. Laura says, no, you're not. Don't say it. I'm not going to live to be 124. But as I get to be older and learn from all these lessons, I take from, I just realize, the opportunities. You got to work hard and you got to work smart. Mm-hmm. But there's, you only get so much done, and you only fulfill the destiny you have within your heart and soul and your mind will only be fulfilled if you maximize every aspect of it. So it's not about working smart, but it is about working smart. But it's about working hard. You got to do it all. And I think that in the end of the day is if you focus, and one of the things I felt like at CSO, we had a family. It wasn't a business, it was a family. And we watched out for each other, and everybody in that firm knew that we cared about each other, and we more so than we cared about our own needs. And again, that's not something you can fake. When I was a paper boy as a young man, my brother handed it down to me. He said, when a dog starts to chase you, just look at it real firm. Don't look scared, because it'll come at you. It can sense if you're scared. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think when you're a leader, you can't fake it. I mean, you can give speeches and you can give pep talks and you can do everything you want. But the people that you have the privilege of serving and leading, they know. They have an instinct, and they know. And it's only when you really, really deeply care about the people around you and their success that you have any chance of reaching your own potential. Yeah,
that's so good. I want to this has been just so good, Jim, and thank you. And I think the answer, Gappers, what I heard Jim say is I never focused on the adversity. I was oblivious to adversity. I woke up and had the right attitude, and adversity wasn't even part of your game, and it wasn't an excuse. It was just a non-factor. And so for those of you who are listening right now, whatever you think you have as adversity, you know what? It's time to get the attitude and flip the switch. And maybe it's time to say there is no such thing as adversity. Only opportunity that presents itself as adversity. And I think that's what Jim was saying. And certainly the energy, the karma, the vitality of others pushes you through any adversity that may be there. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up the show with this thing called Knowledge Through the Decades. I'm sure this is going to be really good and really fun. And what we want to do is just know the attitude lesson as we walk through your life. This is totally spontaneous. We can edit it if you want it to, but I have a feeling you know how to think on your feet, so you will. We're going to ask you the attitude lesson that you've learned growing through your life. And I know that you probably don't remember being born, but when you think about new birth, when you think about the grandchildren that just were born or the one that's getting ready to happen, what's the attitude lesson of being born?
Well, I think that, again, the blessing that I got was from my parents. They made, even though we had 8 kids, they made each one of us feel special. It made us feel important. I remember on my 10th birthday, my mom came out and she gave me a little windbreaker jacket, and she said to me, "You've lived a decade." And I thought, wow, I wasn't real sure what all that meant. But many of the lessons I still use to this day, I learned when I was 4 or 5 years old. I told you we lived in this tiny house, right? We moved when I was 5 years old to a house closer to our school. It was 2 stories, so it had a bath and a half, still 3 bedrooms, but bigger, dining room, kitchen. And a year after we lived there, my sister, we came home, my dad said, "We got to go down to the old house and paint because the renters are moving." And my sister, Mary Claire, said, "Oh, we can move back." Glenn, we moved back to that house, that tiny little house, and we lived there until I was a junior in high school.
Oh, my God.
So I think that was a real lesson, is that it's not about the place, it's about the people.
I love it. I love it. So you already went to 10, not about the place, about the people. That's a real good one. But I want you to go back to being 10, even though you gave us a little windbreaker story. You'd been 4th or 5th grade. Think about your friends, think about your school or your family. What was an attitude lesson that you learned at 10?
Well, you'll love it. I'm sitting there smiling because it just popped in my head. Again, I talk about my mother, God rest her soul. And my father was an incredible man too, as are my siblings. But, when I think it was right about 10, because I was in 4th grade. And I remember my mom, I was with her, she went to church in the confessional. And she walked out and she said, "You want to make your confession?" And I said, "I'm not supposed to. I don't make that till 6th grade." And she said, "You can do it right now." So she said, "Father Tom will do it." So he came out of the confession. She said, "Sure, come on in." And I sat down and he kind of walked me through it. And I did my first confession. And I walked out and my mom said, "You get your pens?" I said, "Yes." And she says, "All right, come with me." So at our church, beautiful Catholic church in South Bend, Holy Cross, great, still a beautiful church, Romanesque design. It's one of my favorite architectural pieces I've ever seen in my life. And there's this huge crucifix, but over the side, there's a Mary statue and there's a Joseph statue. And she walks me over and she kneels down, says, "Kneel down in front of Mary." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "When you have something, you say 3 Hail Marys to the Blessed Mother." And I'm sitting here as a little 10-year-old thinking, well, why don't we just go to the big guy? He just moved 25 feet to the left here and we're right there. And she goes, "Always pray to Mary because a son can never deny a mother's request."
I love it. I love it. That's so good. Oh, my gosh. I love it. All right. Well, let's move to 20. 20 years old, you've graduated from South Bend St. Joe's. You find yourself at Notre Dame. Do you remember your 20th birthday? Do you remember being 20 at Notre Dame? And what was the attitude lesson you learned there at 20?
Well, I broke my wrist on my 20th birthday at the tool and die shop. I turned 20. You want to do something fun, but I wouldn't pass up making the money, missing a night of work. So I remember going to work and I was moving a piece of steel and I should have used the hoist. I didn't. I tried to move it by hand and it fell over and broke my wrist. So that was how I celebrated my 20th birthday. But it was, I think that my high school years were extremely formative for me. Again, being at the high school I went to and being involved in the things I was involved with, I think that's where I came into my own. I'd already had some pretty good luck with athletics, so that just carried on. But then I really worked hard in school, and I was able to get really good grades, which was a little bit different than some of my other friends that weren't as lucky as I was. But, so those years in high school were extremely formative for me.
Yeah. So coming into your own, that you really felt like that happened to you at 20. You became, the base of who you were. Now let's take you up 10 years, 30 years old. Do you remember where you were working, your birthday at 30? And when you think about being 30, what was the attitude lesson that you learned in that decade?
Actually, I apologize. I don't want to go backwards here, but I turned 13 and actually broke my ankle playing volleyball. I don't always break bones, but I have occasionally. But I broke my ankle on that day when I turned 13. I turned 13 on Friday the 13th in 1973.
And broke your ankle. That's appropriate.
30, I guess you come in that point, I've got children now, and there's a whole different perspective on life. And I think when I was 30 with my kids, is I realized that, here I spent my whole life, Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, Catholic college, and my whole life. And, our goal is always to stay true to the gospel of Jesus Christ and to be Christ-like. And I think in my 30s was when I realized that having children, that is the most Christ-like you'll ever be able to be in your life, because that baby, if you don't take care of that baby, it dies. Everything about that baby relies on you. And so I think that it was in my 30s where I probably developed my sense of responsibility, and realizing what an incredible gift that was to have children and to now focus on their well-being.
Man, that's so good. All right, so now you slide into 40. Tell me about the attitude lesson at 40 or in your 40s. What was going on with your life then?
Well, when you get to that age of 40, you start realizing, I guess your mortality, because, in my family, I lost a brother that was 43 years old that died of a massive heart attack. I lost another brother that was 53 that died of cancer. I lost a brother-in-law that died of brain cancer. He was 52, and I lost a 26-year-old sister-in-law that died from a glioblastoma thing. So, life in the 40s, I think I'd define that as becoming, that's when I really realized how precious life is. And when you have to experience that sadness and pain that comes from losing a loved one, that defines my 40s for me. I had so many people come to me. My brother passed away. Worst 72 hours of my life, I had to go get him out in Seattle because he just died suddenly at the airport coming home for Christmas. And his 11-year-old son was with his wife. And people would ask me, how did you ever get over him dying? I said, you don't get over that. Yeah. And I said, they'd ask me, Glenn, they'd say, is it shaking your faith in God? I said, no, it's strengthened it, because, I want to see him again someday. And how's that going to happen? Well, it's going to happen by being good and go to heaven and have eternal salvation. So I think that in my 40s was when that mortality, the realization came for that, and then understanding what that meant and what did I want to do, given that I could see, life goes on. Is that when you hit 40, then you realize that 23 years prior to that, you graduated from high school, and that seems like it went by in a flash, and you realize that when that next 40 or next 20 happens, you ain't going to be here. So it's an awakening.
All right, so 50, things started getting interesting for you, I'm sure, right? I mean, as for many people, life can take a turn. I think the idea and the wrestling with mortality can propel you into new thoughts and new things, and I think maybe this is when you really started, taking off on the service end. But when you think about turning 50, do you remember turning 50, and what do you think the attitude lesson is through your 50s?
I do remember 50, and the reason I remember that is, my brothers and I all wore number 50.
Yes.
At St. For, I don't know, 16, 17, 18 years in a row. So 50's always been kind of a family favorite of the boys. But, I think that when I was in that, I don't remember the day. I don't remember the exact time of the year, whether it was 49 or 51. But I think that's when I got in a position where I was pretty much in control of my destiny. I was in control of a lot of other people's too, or I had an impact. I shouldn't say control. I had a potential impact as a leader, which, and so I think when I hit my 50s is when I realized, and I was in a situation very, very fortunate to where I could give back. I could give to things. I could donate time architecturally. I could donate things to people. I could really become a player because I had the resources, and in some ways I had more time than I did when I was earlier, just trying to fight off the waves. But, an experience I had in my 50s, which doesn't seem very long ago, but I went out to a game. Notre Dame was playing the Washington Huskies, and I was my family and I, maybe 15, 16 of us, you can imagine, go to a football game, and we're down in this alley in downtown Seattle at an Irish pub. And as we're going into the pub, I saw a guy that was homeless in a little alcove of the back of an old building in an alley. And I couldn't get my mind off of him the whole time I was in the restaurant. And I just kept thinking, I should get him something to eat. I should give him some money. So I tucked a $20 bill in my palm of my hand. I said, I'll just slip this to him when I come out. I don't want to draw any attention to it. We came out, he was gone. And I felt bad and walked to the end of the alley, and I'm trying to herd cats and say, come on, everybody, we got to go. And I see him back in the alley. And so I turned to Laura and I said, here, take this and run back there and give it to that guy. And she said, why? I go, just do it. So she runs back and does it. And she comes back and her dad says, what are you doing? And she said, well, Jim wanted me to take a $20 bill back there and give it to this guy. And he looked at me and he said, why would you do that? Now, without thinking, just like this little thing you're doing here, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, without being able to premeditate, my thought, I just said, could be Jesus.
Right.
And I think that's carried me a long time since then, of understanding that everywhere you go, we talk about adversity. Man, I have no adversity compared to what some people have.
Yeah, isn't that true? And I think Jesus tells us, whatsoever you do for the least of my brother is what you do unto me. So it, in fact, was Jesus. All right. Well, now you're in your 60s. So I want to know about what you're thinking about 60 and what 60 to, I don't know how old you are. You're 60-something. 62. So you just hit it. And so, what's your, as you sat there and blew out the candles at 60, what was your thought? What's the word? What's the attitude that you're taking into 60?
Well, when you get to that age, they don't put individual candles on the cake anymore. They put the number. It's interesting. 60 years old, when I turned 60, boy, it's like, well, first of all, you feel like, you're getting up there. And I'd been all over the world at that time, and I'd gotten to meet just incredible people from every walk of life that I had no right to meet. Just a privilege to meet all these people and to be doing what I was doing. And I think that for the 60s, for me, I think it's more, again, it's all about the family. It's about the grandkids. It's now more about, I've done some of the major things I wanted to do in my life. And now I want to try to help other people accomplish what they want to do in life. At Butler University, the charge the president asked me to do was to help Butler become even more top of mind nationally and internationally than it already is. And so that's something I've taken on, and I'm very proud to do that because I believe, and I believe in Butler University. And so when you believe in something, as you know, it's a lot easier to deal with it than not deal with it. But I think, I think real estate. Okay, so when I turned 60, I think I started thinking about real estate. And the reason why, Glenn, is because knowing your business, I was out of the country and my wife sold our house. In fact, somebody I know here helped her.
Yeah.
And it wasn't for sale. That's the catch. She sold it while I was out of the country. And she called me and she said, I sold the house. Now, we talked about selling it because we wanted to downsize a little bit. We're empty nesters. But, she took me off guard and she said, I sold the house. And I said, okay, well, you better go find one and buy one. I said, and this time, I bought that house, as you know, to renovate it, fix it up, sell it. So I said, this time buy a house you really, really like. And she did. And we moved in here about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, thanks to you. And then my attention right away turned to real estate again. And somebody says, well, you just moved. I said, isn't that kind of real estate? We're talking Crown Hill real estate now.
Right.
I really, on a serious note, I've had to go into 5 family members when they passed away that had zero preparations for
right.
it. And when you're in that moment of grief, and you have to deal with that. I don't want to put anybody through that. So, again, I'm a young. I feel 60. Come on, I feel like I'm 25.
It's yeah. It's a new 40, 60.
It's really crazy. Sometimes when I see a picture of myself, I'm like, who is that? That looks like my dad or my uncles or something. You don't feel the way you look necessarily.
I know everybody's like. They all tell you, oh, you look just like your father. I'm like, oh, shit, I must be getting old here. Well, Jim, that was so good, the ladder of Jim's life. And as we just walk through this, I want all the people listening to the podcast, all the gappers, to check themselves on 1 to 10. He said childbirth and new beginnings are a blessing. And I ask you yourself, how blessed do you really feel? And if you don't feel blessed, what can you do to feel more blessed? He talked about 10 and the respect and the aura of a mother, and what a great story you did. Those of you out there, if you're having a conflict with your mother, you know what? Now's the time to fix it. At 20, he became independent. How independent are you really in your life? Are you relying on too many other people? Are you letting your success be limited by other people's thoughts? Or do you finally believe in yourself and know that you have the fortitude to do it? And then at 30, he talked about the massive responsibility that he felt when he had kids. And do you take an inventory of your responsibility? How responsible do you feel? And are you responsible to win is what I like. You know, there's people that I believe use responsibility to lose, to make excuses, and there's those people that take responsibility and move forward. Then at 40, you know, the mortality of things, gappers, you know, have you questioned your mortality, and have you thought about those around you who maybe have gone before you, and maybe those that are on the edge right now, and what are you doing for them? And then in the 50s, the word impact came through. And no matter if you're 50 or if you're 20 or if you're 30 listening to this or if you're 80, your ability to impact is an attitude. Creating an impact is an attitude, and I hope that you take that with you after this interview. And then preparation and service at 60 was his final two things. And do you have a heart of service? Who are you serving? When people look at, am I giving value? Well, value is defined as what you do for someone on behalf of someone before you ask them to do anything for you. And that's really the foundation and attitude of service and preparation. So, Jim, those were awesome. Your interview was fantastic. We always like to give you just one last word in the podcast. You know, whether you're standing in front of a baseball team or a football team or your company at CSO, there are people listening to you today that came here to bridge the gap from who they are to who they want to become. They're bridging the gap from where they are to where they want to be. And I'm hoping that you can just give them a few words from your heart and your soul on if somebody's standing there at that bridge trying to get across it, what's your best advice and what's your hope for them and the hope for the future of our listeners?
Well, you know, the definition I learned, literary definition of a romantic, is somebody that longs for the past and looks forward to the future and doesn't do so well living in the present, which is something I have to work on every day. But, you know, when you do stuff and you go out and do it, and, you know, for other people, you realize how fun it is. What you get from that is just, it's energizing. We talk about attitude. You know, if you have an issue with your attitude on a given day, go do something nice for somebody and see how that changes your attitude. And that's because it's fun. And my father-in-law, I don't know, I'm guessing this isn't an original, but we'll give him credit out in Seattle, Washington for this. But his definition of fun, anything you don't have to do. So I think that's something that we don't have to necessarily help everybody around us, but it's fun to do it.
Right. I love it. Well, Jim, I want to thank you for carrying the light through your life, to your family, to your company, to our state of Indiana. But most of all, we want to thank you for carrying the light on the Get Attitude podcast. This is Glenn Bill with Jim Schellinger signing off. Jim, thanks so much.
Thank you, Glenn.